Hi besties, Karissa here again, and we are about to go through chapter 6 in our study of Darlene Check's book on the book of Esther. And again, I want to mention that if you want to purchase this, it's available at Amazon.com. If you cannot afford to purchase it, it is also available for free download on Darlene's website. If you go to timewarpwife.com, hit the link, become a subscriber, and then all of her resources will become available to you. So please enjoy that. And jumping into this chapter, we know from watching the chiastic structure that we kind of talked about at the introduction of this study that this is like the climactic moment where everything switches. It's like the point that the structure, the chiastic structure, comes to where everything starts to happen in reverse. And super interesting to watch how it goes from this climax of doom that the Jews feel and the plan that's happening, the plot that's about to happen to Mordecai, to just a sudden switch of him being honored instead, and then Haman being found out, and then the people being saved. It's just amazing how quickly that happens. So on page 54, I'll just read this part. More often than not, there's effort and dedication behind the things that we enjoy, and that's absolutely true. A beautiful garden, well-behaved children, amen. Food on the table, a roof over our heads, the carpet under our feet, the clean water that we drink, and the list goes on. If we grasp this simple truth, perhaps we can start to discern God's handiwork in the hidden corners of our lives. Maybe we can trust that God is at work in the most seemingly insignificant moments of our life. And that's where I think good character comes to play, because I think that when we're prepared for God to use us, we're on our best behavior. But when we're in line at the grocery store, or when we're just sitting in our car alone, or how we spend our free time even, or that testimony that we have when people are watching and we don't really notice, then God is also at work. And I think those are the moments that reveal our true character. And if we have the character of Christ, it's in those moments that it shines very bright. Because of course, if you're, at church, or you're, doing something spiritual, you have that like persona on kind of, and you could fake it if you really wanted to. But when it's your day-to-day grind of life, in those insignificant moments, and you still have good character, and you still show the love of Christ, and it's still your choice to show that love and that maybe positive attitude, or kind gestures, or just going the extra mile, that is a testimony for the Lord as well. And I think we often sometimes forget to focus on those moments, and I think they are the moments that reveal the true character that's inside. But he is at work in seemingly insignificant moments in our lives. With this perspective in mind, we can clearly see God's hand at work in Esther Chapter 6. The king wasn't awake by sheer chance. It wasn't a fluke, good fortune, or luck that he discovered Mordecai's role in thwarting his assassination. This was an undeniable demonstration of God's perfect timing. The events of that night were planned with precision and predetermined by God. And I think that that's why I was blown away by how after that whole experience, Haman goes back to his family, and all of them are just like, clearly you are like doomed. Like you're not gonna be able to thrive. What do they say exactly? I'm gonna find it here since I have my Bible open to that spot. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all of his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors, his wife Zeresh and wife, said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him." Super interesting. Why do they say that? They don't explain themselves. "You will surely come to ruin." And I'm curious, this is just my speculation, but it's so curious to me how quickly he goes into just knowing after that moment that he's not going to overcome this. And I wonder if it's because he sees the hand of God in it. He knows that the God of the Jews is not for him, or that the God of the Jews, is for Mordecai, and that he can't come up against that. Because what are the chances of the coincidence of this happening the very moment that he's going to go tell the king, or ask the king if he can kill this specific man? That king asks him to honor that man. And I wonder if that alone was enough evidence to him that the God of the Jews is real. And I'm just curious, like I wonder what it is that made them think, oh, he's certainly a Jew of origin, of you're not going to be able to come against him. Like, what was it in that statement that they're really saying? You know, I'm so curious. But anyways, you can also just see like Haman's pride on display in verse 6 and 7, where it says, like, the king asks, what should the king do for a man that he desires to honor? And immediately Haman assumes that he's that man. And that again just goes to show the state of his heart, right? And I'm gonna admit, I've done this before too. Different situations, of course. I've never stood before a king before, but like, it's so easy to assume the best of yourself and just to see like, well, I'm the one that deserves, let's say, the promotion, or of course they're gonna give me this, or of course like they're gonna thank me for that, or I'm probably gonna get appreciation in front of everybody for all of my effort. And it's just so easy to have that prideful attitude and that desire again for that self-worship, right? That gratification that our flesh just longs for. And I'm so curious, I kind of think that pride is just like one of the deepest rooted sins in humanity, because I think it is a huge part that played a role in Lucifer falling, because he desired to be worshipped and powerful like God. And that was his downfall. And I think that is the very nature of our sin, is that desire to also be worshipped, that desire to also be great, that desire, that just comes from that nature of sin. And I'm curious. That's just a speculation in my mind. I've wondered about it before. Anyway, moving on. And then she talks about the story of Joseph, which is a really interesting comparison. But she's talking about how God can use the worst circumstances and still turn it for his favor. And Joseph, if you've ever wanted to study an interesting and like really gripping story in the Bible, like it's one of those ones you almost just don't want to put the Bible down. You just want to read it straight through, because it's just amazing seeing how the hand of God moves through every single different situation that comes. And there's a lot of them in the story of Joseph. But it tells us that the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, because his brothers sold him into slavery. Like, it doesn't get much worse than that. And it's true, you watch his life and he was blessed. And she says, like Mordecai, Joseph's circumstances weren't a result of coincidence, luck, or chance, but they were finely tuned by the orchestration of God. Every high and low was designed with a purpose. And whether he felt like God was beside him or not, he was at work behind the curtain of everyday life, bringing forth purpose through pain. And I just want to stop on that for a second. I know a lot of Christians struggle with this idea of God using pain in our lives. And I just think that the Bible is really clear that he has, in the history of Israel, if you've ever studied the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, that pain is kind of inevitable in this life. And it's not like we didn't choose that. Like, sin was ours, we chose that, and because of that there's pain. And God can still use that pain, and sometimes out of his desperation to get our hearts, he has to use pain, because if all he did was bless us, we would think that life is great and we would never depend on him, and we'd never turn to him, and we'd never humble ourselves before him or become desperate enough to give our lives fully to him. We would just be content in our lack of him and our fullness of the world. So something that has helped me, because we can wonder, like, if God is a good God, like, why does he let me, like a good person, go through painful situations when he already has my heart? And there are so many things that God does behind the scenes that we have no understanding of. And I love that she quotes later on the verse, or did she already? Yes, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Proverbs 3:5-6. It's such a clear picture that God might do things that do not make any sense to us. And there are times that God is going to do things that we do not like. And even in that moment, I get to choose to worship him, and I get to choose to submit to him. And I'm never going, the thing that helps me with this is that even in the midst of extreme pain and grieving, Sorry if you can hear my daughter, she's talking to herself in her room. Even in the midst of extreme pain, we can remind ourselves of our eternal reward. And is it Peter or Paul that does that in the New Testament? He's like, all of this is going to be nothing compared to the weight of glory that we will receive. And that's something that we need to keep right in front of us, especially going through times like persecution or things like that. We need to remember that from the eyes of eternity, like the Karissa that's going to be there with Jesus in eternity is going to look back on my life, and I'm not going to wish the pain wasn't there. I'm going to be thankful that God used that pain to fine-tune me, to catch my attention, to help me fall in love with him more, to help me become more dedicated, to help me to realize my need for him. And I'm not going to regret that. I might even ask my God, why did you not let me go through more? Why didn't you help me understand more how much I needed you? And he's going to say, you forget like how weak the flesh is when you're there. You know, that's just in my imagination. But I can only imagine standing there with Jesus and looking back at my life, and there's not going to be an ounce of pain that I will say was not worth it. It'll be all worth it. It doesn't matter what's to come or what I've already gone through in my life from this point. It'll all be 100% worth it. And that gives me hope when I'm in the midst of the pain. And maybe it can give you some hope too. I loved the next part of this, okay? The turn of events in Esther 6:10 is highly ironic, almost humorous in its divine orchestration. Exactly. It's a clear demonstration of God's perfect timing. Go at once, the king commanded Haman, get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the gate. Do not neglect anything you've commanded. Isn't this just like God to flip the script when we least expect it? Isn't that what he did on the cross? In the ultimate display of divine strategy, God used the cross, an instrument of death and despair, as a stage for his glory. Satan may have thought that he had claimed victory over Jesus, that he had claimed victory when Jesus was nailed to the cross, but that was far from the truth. The crucifixion, a seemingly tragic ending, was not the end at all. In the quiet of the tomb, God was still at work, orchestrating the greatest miracle of all. One that would elevate Jesus to the highest place with the name above all names. And I love that Darlene just totally tucked the gospel right into the middle of this story, because it's so true. That was a moment that I'm sure all of his followers were like, what? Like, we thought you were the Messiah. We've spent all these months with you and now you're just dead. Like, can you imagine the loss and like the confusion that they must have felt in their souls? And yeah, the amazement when they actually got to see him again, and just the realization of what's actually happened and how God did flip the script when we least expected it. And he's very good at doing that. And he will do that in your life if you let him. He will use your greatest pains. That rhymes, for the greatest gains. He will use your pain. He will not waste it. I love that. He will not waste your pain if you let him. There's part of us can just hold on to that and we can grow bitter. And I've said this before in another video, but we can choose to get bitter or better from every single situation that we are faced with. No matter how much of a victim we are in the situation, no matter how much control we had in the situation, we can still choose how we respond. We can still choose to either get bitter or get better. And God will also use those things to grow our character and to help us become more wise, more diligent, more peaceful, more joyful. Like, he can help us learn so many things. I learned how to be joyful by going through depression. Like, I know that that's crazy, but that's very, very true. I learned how to choose joy even when I didn't feel it. And if I hadn't gone through that depth of depression, I would not have the appreciation for the amount of joy that I have today. And so going back and looking back from my life at this point, I can say, yes, it was absolutely worth it. But in that moment, was I in the pits of despair. And it was so hard to see, the forest through the trees. And in that moment, it just took an ounce of faith to say, I still believe that you're good. Just like we talked about in Psalm 13, you can sharing your heart with God and the depths of your pain with God, but then saying, I still choose to believe that you're good. I still choose to trust in you at the end of the day, and he will carry you through. I really like this question that Darlene asked. What some might call coincidence is clearly the providence of God through the book of Esther. List a few of the events in the story thus far that were clearly orchestrated by God. And even just like the small things in this story amaze me, like the fact that Esther was really beautiful. Like that was not a coincidence. And that she was chosen by the king. Like that's crazy to begin with again. Mordecai working close to the palace so that he could visit her, that he could see her, that he was involved by being able to save the king, like all of those things. Mordecai being the reason for the Jews' downfall, and then afterwards also for their survival. So he was the reason why Haman got so upset, and then he also becomes the answer to the problem at the end. And so it's just like so interesting. There are so many little things in this story that just like perfectly fall into place. And if you ever experience that in your life, where God just puts all the pieces together just perfectly in a moment, and then you're like, okay, his will is like obvious right now, it's just, you just are in awe of him, and it's amazing. Let's stop to consider some valuable lessons. God's timing is always perfect, and he works in ways that we might never anticipate. You know, I'll just quickly share a funny story because it's coming to mind. But I went to YWAM when I was 18, and then that program basically you do 3 months of like DTS training or Bible study training type of thing, and then you do 2 months of outreach. And I chose to go to Africa. We went to Uganda with my outreach, so we're there for 2 months together as a team through YWAM. And then my outreach leader shared at the end that he was actually going to come back later, like in I think it was in 6 months or something, and that if any of us wanted to come along with him, we were more than welcome. It'd be outside of YWAM. It would just be like him and a few of us from the group staying to help this ministry that we got so close with in Uganda. And my answer was like, absolutely not. That's not gonna be me. There's definitely some other people here that are gonna do that, but that's not my thing. I am ready to go home. I am ready to be with my family. And I had a boyfriend at the time that I wanted to go back and see. I didn't want to leave him again. And there was all of these things. I had so many reasons. I needed to save up some money and find a job and whatever and whatnot. And he just kind of told me, he's like, I think you're gonna be coming. And I was like, sorry, no. He's like, all right, well, we'll wait and see. And then lo and behold, I feel this tug on my heart that I'm supposed to go, and God is just putting this tug on my heart, and so I'm like, okay, God, like if you really want me to go, here's this list of 10 things that has to happen. I have to find people to travel with, because there's no way I'm flying to Africa by myself. I have to be able to raise the finances. I have to be able to like work and earn enough money, but also be able to like quit my job. My boyfriend, this was a huge one, my boyfriend would have to break up with me, and it would have to be mutual. I'm not gonna break up with him. And I had just this huge list of things, and they all happened, like within a week or something like that. They all happened. And it was like, okay, Lord, like if you want me to go, then I'll go. And it was just one of those moments where he orchestrated everything so perfectly. And those 6 months, I went back for 6 or 7 months after that, and those months changed my life forever. And so I am so glad I went, but in hindsight, it's just very funny watching him just put all the pieces together for me. So in closing, God's timing is always perfect, and he works in ways that we might never anticipate. Pride and ill intentions, as seen in Haman, lead to downfall, while righteousness demonstrated by Mordecai is eventually honored. Let's carry these truths into our daily lives, trusting in God's perfect timing, striving to walk in humility and righteousness, and remembering that God is our just and sovereign King. No matter what we face, dear friend, no matter what we face, dear friend, we can trust in him. That was a perfect way to end this. I can hear my daughter complaining in her room, so I do need to go. But thank you guys so much for being here and for joining me in this. I have so thoroughly enjoyed this study, and I hope you guys are as well. So again, please feel free to comment in the comment sections, share what stood out to you, share the things that are challenging to you in this study, and the things that you're really enjoying. And until next week, I will see you again. Bye for now.